aspirants, welcome to Narayan IAS. Welcome to this new edition of Daily News Analysis, where we have brought lot of curated content for your preliminary and main examination requirements. Let us look at the articles that we have chosen for your today's analysis. The first article that we have chosen is from the Hindu, where this judgment from the Allahabad High Court, which has termed the UP Madarsa Act as a violation of secularism, is going to be discussed. The second article is again from the Hindu, where this article titled Two Wars, the Consequences for America's Standing, Pertinent Issues in Today's International Politics. The third article is from the Indian Express, where we will be looking into the state of the economy as on today and also the global economic situation, whereby we will try to understand where this macroeconomic stability of Indian economy is today in comparison with the global economic situation. The next article is again from the Indian Express titled A Narrow Resolution, wherein we will look at one resolution which has been adopted by the UN General Assembly, which has been introduced by Pakistan. The last article is from the Hindu, which is titled India Now Eyes Africa for Critical Minerals, where we will also be looking at some of the distribution of these critical minerals across the world, which become very important for the human society to advance towards a better living in the coming 7 or 8 years. Lastly, we also have a section where we will look into some of the practice questions of both preliminary and mains kind. Dear students, embark on your UPSC journey with Narayana IAS Academy. Our esteemed 5-year and 3-year integrated programs are now open for admissions in Hyderabad, Vijayawada and Nellore. Our courses include robust R&D backed initiatives such as daily news analysis, daily news review, which are comprehensive review program for a broader understanding of our day-to-day happenings, which are current affairs. Similarly, we have NCERT program, which is a foundational course that covers all the NCERT syllabi, which is crucial for UPSC preparation. We also have a mentorship program for personalized guidance, and we also have a regular test series for systematic learning and assessment of the student. So begin your journey to become a leader with Narayana IAS Academy today. Embark on this journey, make your dream come into a reality with Narayana IAS Academy. In this first article, we are trying to see the intersectionality between education and the constitutional framework, which is giving us certain fundamental principles upon which our entire societal living is based. In this particular aspect, we should look into this fundamental value called secularism and how it is pertinent for us in order to make sure that the education which is being imparted is clearly in tune with such constitutional frameworks. In this first article, we will be dealing with education as a scenario from the perspective of the constitutional framework, which is guaranteeing some of the values of the society as basic structure of the constitution. And fundamentally, we will be focusing upon this idea of secularism. This article is important for us from the examination point of view under GS paper 2, wherein this constitution's significant provisions and the basic structure can be one aspect wherefrom you can actually get any question. On the other hand, this is the aspect of secularism, and the right to education within the framework of secularism is what the focus of this particular article, and we will be trying to deal with some of the basic aspects of both of these. Moving ahead, look at this previous year question asked in 2020 prelims. Consider the following statements. The first statement is the Constitution of India defines its basic structure in terms of federalism, secularism, fundamental rights and democracy. Second one, the Constitution of India provides for judicial review to safeguard the citizens' liberties and to preserve the ideals on which the Constitution is based. Which of the statement given above is our correct? As you clearly see here, if any news or any particular article is dealing with those fundamental frameworks that become most important for your examination. Moving ahead, what is the context? As we have already seen in the news clipping, you find that the Allahabad High Court has come out with a particular verdict. In this particular verdict, it said this law referred to as Uttar Pradesh Board of Madrasa Education Act 2004 has been held unconstitutional. Why it has been held unconstitutional? The reasoning that it was giving was that it is found to be a violation of the secularism, and as you clearly know, the secularism has been touted as one of the basic structure of the Constitution of India. It is this particular conflict between the education which is of traditional one, which is imparting religious education, and its conflict with the fundamental aspects of secularism, particularly from the perspective of Article 21A, is what the specific debate that we have to understand. Always remember, education is having a particular definition as has been understood in general. One, that it is about the experience that you are gaining. It's about the experience that you are gaining. However, in this particular experience, you must gain what is called as the socialized value. That is, all these experiences must have had what is called as socialized values, and all of these values which are being understood as socialized are being accrued through an individual. This is what in fact an educational institution must do. Here, if I understand this as the definition of education, of course, as has been given by John Dewey, the noted educationist, the immediate essence of education hence seems to be that the institution which is being built for this purpose of education must impart the experiences to every learner in such a way that they are gaining these socialized values, or these experiences are being gained as socialized values, and all of these are being done not only individually as an individual experience, but also collectively as a collective experience. It is this broader definition which has been imparted to education as a scenario, number one. Number two, when you look at this and when you also understand that this education must hence have this socialized value, let us look at what are those socialized values which have to be clearly construed as framework to go towards every learner. That is the constitutional framework which is giving you certain principles. One such principle is, as you know, secularism or secular fabric of the society, democratic fabric of the society. In order to have these values to be imparted, in order to make sure that these values are being learned as socialized values by the individual and also by the community in collection through this so-called education in terms of their experience, what are those fundamental elements which are required? There are three such fundamental dimensions or principles which are required for education as a fundamental plank on which the society has to be built. One is what is referred to as access. Everyone must have access to such an experience. Second, it must be about autonomy. That means this experience which is being imparted as a social value must occur under the conditions of autonomy but not under force. Third, or under imposition. Third, it must occur as what is called as authority. That is, it is to be done by the acceptance of the learners but not as part of the imposition through any kind of power structure. If you look at all these three basic contours of the education, now you start looking at the principal values that we have as part of our constitutional framework. Secularism, as in this case of S.R. Bommai, we understand that the state must strictly be separate from the religion. And if you look at this particular definition attributed by the Supreme Court towards secularism, you clearly see that secularism as an aspect is somehow getting related to religion. Why is the question? If you look at the Western experience where the secularism as idea actually has emerged, there was always a conflict between the church and the state which was emerging, and who is the one or which is the entity which has what is called as power and authority over the entire society, whose prevalence must be more in comparison with the other. On the other hand, if you look at the Indian scenario, the emergence of secularism is not of this kind, where there is struggle between the religious structure and the political structure. However, the need for secularism in India arose particularly after 19th century in two fundamental contexts. One is what is referred to as the persisting religious strife under the colonial experience. I am referring to it as colonial experience because I am looking at from the education sector point of view. Second, apart from this religious strife, there is another thing that religion started doing, that religion or religious communities might overpower the state. And the second, the possibility of religious communities overcoming the authority of the state, behaving as extra institutions going beyond the authority of the state. It is these two particular contexts in which the need for secularism in India has been felt. Referred to as Uttar Pradesh Board of Madras Education Act 2004, it is trying to make or impart education to certain religious minorities. What was the conflicting situation in this? So, they have defined what is called as Madrasa education. In this, they say that education in Arabic or Arabic studies or Arabic literature, Urdu, Persian, Islamic studies or the Tib logic, philosophy and all other such branches of learning which are included here as may be specified by a specific board which has been set up under this particular law is what will be referred to as education or madrasa education. Second, the board which has been constituted is being set up to govern this particular requirement of defining what is madrasa education and what must be included in it, and as part of this law it has been created. And if you look at this particular board, all of the members seems to be from that particular minority group itself. Third, this board was functioning under the Ministry of Minority Welfare rather than under the Ministry of Education. Now, the court was looking at three of these fundamental aspects. The first one, as it said, even though is of very much importance to that religious community, on the other hand, it was limiting this to only one section of the population and creating a clear demarcation between the education in general and education that is being imparted as part of this. Second, as this board was set up, the court held that the board or setting up of the board itself is unconstitutional because it is taking away the right to education by even those who are undergoing this education through formalized channels such as schools. Third, as it is functioning under the minority welfare, the fundamental question that the court had was why it is not kept under the Ministry of Education. Hence, it said there is a void between what actually is being pursued as education and what actually has been defined as education. Along with that, secularism, even though has not been defined by the constitution, clear construct of what secularism is. One, we know that state is separate from education. However, we are seeing here that state has created a board to impart religious education and establish the board for the school education where a particular religion and philosophy is associated with it, and hence it is going against what has been touted as secularism by Supreme Court in the SR Bommai case. Second, we also see that the state has the duty to provide education which is of secular nature, and hence particularly for those minors, it has to provide this as part of Article 21A. When both of these are not occurring, it also said that the right to life and liberty is coming under jeopardy, and hence this has to be corrected. There are few more problems that we see in this particular judgment. Number one, secularism is all about what we do in this world if you look at the dictionary meaning. However, as we see that every religion has one fundamental belief. That fundamental belief is the existence of the other world, meaning whatever we do here on this particular planet called Earth, all these acts which are to be touted as good deeds will take them post their death towards that other world where they feel that there will be salvation, meaning they will be free from that birth and death cycle. On the other hand, as you are already doing all these so-called good deeds as part of your religious prescription on this planet alone, all these are termed as secular activities. It is not just those activities which are out of religion, but also all those activities which are also being done as part of religion are also touted as secular activities, meaning even if that imparting education by a particular community on the basis of religious belief itself cannot be taken away as a fundamental right, except when state is doing it. It is in this case the state was trying to impart such education towards one particular community, and hence they held that this is unconstitutional. On the other hand, education can be given in the languages which are spoken by the minorities, as you clearly see in some of the states. But here again, if it is kept under the Ministry of Education, then it would be seen as an educational platform, but not as the religious platform. It is these basic contours of education and secularism which has been brought together in order to understand this particular issue and correct the situation as held by the High Court. Moving to the next article, we will discuss this article in which he is looking at the politics played in USA as domestic politics and its impact over the entire international affairs, looking at it from the context of these two wars which are ongoing. One is Russia-Ukraine war and the other one is Israel-Palestine conflict. We shall look into its details. This article is important from GS paper 2 for mains examination as part of international relations. On the other hand, this also gives you some understanding about Israel-Palestine conflict and Russia-Ukraine war, wherein these wars and its relevance in terms of international affairs or broader application of international law in the affairs of the international politics, all these aspects can be understood. Moving ahead, look at this previous year question. In what ways would the ongoing US-Iran nuclear pact controversy affect the national interest of India? How should India respond to its situation? Asked in 2018, these politics which are ongoing, which is being looked at from the context of these two wars, hence can also be a possible area where the question can appear. What is the context? Remember, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine already had its wider ramifications. We know that it had its impact over the Red Sea region. We know that it had its impact over the broader Central Asian region. We also know that as part of one petition filed by South Africa in the International Court of Justice, even had its ramifications over the wider international affairs across the world. Given this importance, USA, which had been a supporter of this particular conflict earlier, now has started advocating a ceasefire because time and again UN has clearly commented that, particularly UNHRC, that the conflict is becoming a humanitarian crisis for Palestine. The famine is going to impact Palestinian people, and we have also seen so many videos being surfaced on social media which has clearly pointed out violations in terms of human rights violations. Given all of these, there is a turmoil in the USA that they were advocating change in the Israeli government, and second, we also see that the relationship between USA and Israel is getting weakened and weakened given this particular conflict. Moreover, what you see is, in spite of this situation, on the other hand, with respect to Ukraine war, you would see that the support to Ukraine by USA is consistently there. As you clearly see, apart from European Union, which has pledged an aid which is approximately equaling $144 billion, US till now has contributed to the extent of $75 billion for the military purposes, wherein this aid includes even the equipment and weapons to sustain the government there and also their humanitarian requirements. However, when it comes to the Israeli-Palestine conflict, even here too, they have supported the stand taken by the Israeli government against the Palestinians. As you see both of these conflicts, they were ongoing conflicts, and we know that the suffering for the humanity is huge. When this is the reality, what are those 4 or 5 dimensions that we need to understand out of this particular article? Number one, USA has failed to understand that war in its reality must never occur. As you see this war as a requirement, political requirement for your need in the name of security, you continued with the so-called war and your support for one or the other nation, rather than addressing the situation of war itself, completely calling for their end. Second, in this regard, we have what is called as international law, and as part of this international law, you have what is referred to as UN Charter and UN Declaration for Human Rights. As part of this, in any eventuality of what is called as difference of opinion between two nation states, wherein this difference of opinion might lead to a situation of conflict, then the role for UN is clearly defined, that they have to mediate and make sure that there is no war, such that international peace and international security is not compromised. For this, the primary and the predetermined principle is that once territorial sovereignty, once territorial sovereignty and territorial integrity must not be compromised. What you see in both of these wars or conflicts that we are seeing, which are ongoing, it is these two principles which have fundamentally been violated. The fundamental plank on the basis of which the entire UN Charter is built, it is this which has been violated. Strengthening this particular charter and implementing it across the globe is what the priority must be, which has not happened. Third, as you see, on the one hand, when it comes to Russia-Ukraine war, all the nations across the world, particularly those who are in support of NATO and its activities, said that Russia's action was a kind of aggression. So, it is an aggression of Russia over Ukraine. But on the other hand, whenever they refer to this Israel-Palestine conflict, this conflict is being seen as a response of Israel against so-called terror activity from Hamas. But on the other hand, as a response to such terror activity, this war being justified is what being questioned in the international community. That is, there was no clear principled stand with respect to both of these wars by what is called as the NATO grouping, which is led by the USA. Fourth, as you see that USA is calling for ceasefire, what the requirement is that it has to call for the end of war itself, where it is proactively asking the Israeli government to end the war with immediate effect. Similarly, even with respect to Russia-Ukraine conflict, this is what must happen, wherein both of these go to negotiating over the field through weapons. Moving ahead, as you see that the upcoming elections in USA are playing a huge role, and this which is playing its impact over the international affairs and their challenges. Moreover, as you observe with respect to this Israel and Gaza action, there is a shift in the American stance which is being signaled. However, it is occurring only to the extent of calling for ceasefire, but not to the extent of ending the war itself. Moreover, even it is unable to negotiate with the Israeli government, which is more powerful than Palestine, and command Israeli government to the extent of ending this particular war. So, there is a clear failure of this so-called unipolar world that they claim, for which they are the leaders. Second, there is no presence of multipolarity, given the fact that this international organization named UN has clearly failed in ending both of these wars. And here also, all the developed nations have played a role which is detrimental to the existence of UN itself, right from the weaknesses of UN General Assembly, which represents all the members of the United Nations, to the extent of even having what is called as permanent Security Council, and in the Security Council having some membership which has a privilege called as permanent membership who also has the veto power. Reforming this was also not being taken up in order to make sure that multilateralism prevails. All these hence pertinently talk about the failure of the developed countries' politics in the international arena. So, as we see that as the US elections are on the horizon, this current situation of talking of ceasefire or supporting Ukraine are occurring rather than looking at it from the principal point of view. Second, this is influencing what is called as Russia's approach towards NATO, not only in the present but also in the future. This is where you can also place this statement from the president of Russia that it may not even hesitate to go for the nuclear war. On the other hand, the upcoming elections is also throwing up this challenge of re-election of Donald Trump, and we know that in the leadership of Donald Trump, USA has created more uncertainty in the global politics and affecting not only the politics but also economy and other aspects of human life. Moving ahead, we also have the situation of reduction of American support for most of the international institutions, be it UN, be it WTO, be it even the UNHCR, where this reduction in support will have broader implications for international security. Here itself you will see that USA might face this challenge of reduction in credibility as a player in international security and also as a defender of European security against the challenge of either Russia or China, and it might also affect its strategic alliances in Indo-Pacific region, including their relationship with South Korea, Japan, Philippines, and this so-called burgeoning partnership with India. And this potential shift hence raises the reliability of the US as a global ally and security partner even for India, and this is more also important for other partners too. Moving to the next article, we shall look into the situation of global economy and the Indian economy specifically and how they are faring as RBI was taking stock of both of these situations. This article is important from Main's point of view where we can look into the growth and development and issues concerning it. And as I said, we are looking at some of the key and high frequency indicators in order to know the state of the economy, not only at the Indian economy level, but also of the global economy. Look at this previous year question asked in 2017. Economic growth in country X will necessarily have to occur if there is technical progress in the world economy, there is population growth in X, there is capital formation in X, the volume of trade grows in the world economy. As this question clearly shows, taking stock of global economic situation means we are looking at some of the very foundational high frequency indicators to know how sort of effect it has over Indian economy and how Indian economy is actually placed amidst such situation. As we have clearly seen that the RBI has taken stock of the Indian economy and global economic situation. What is that particular aspects that we have to know? There are 5 fundamental things which we will focus upon. First one is, what is this global GDP growth forecast is or nowcast is? As it is clearly seen with respect to OECD and with respect to CEIC, this situation is being assessed. Over time since 2021, as you clearly see, the long term average is clearly showing a declining trend, number one. Number two, if you see here quarter by quarter with respect to OECD, definitely the economies are slowing down. Number 4, more importantly, if you look at these 52 countries of the CIC which you see as a forecast, definitely there is a particular kind of what is called as recovery going through in these economies, and however all of these are converging in terms of slowdown. What is that this particular figure is giving us as clear info of the global economic situation? Persisting situations across the globe, whether it is economic or even otherwise in the form of geopolitical tensions or supply chain disruptions, what we are seeing is globally on an average it is moving towards a slowing situation. It is this which you have to keep in mind in order to assess the next aspect. In the post-pandemic scenario, the global economy was witnessing an improvement in the global supply chain scenario. On the other hand, since last May, what we have witnessed is a situation which is reversing in this particular aspect. Moving ahead, if you look at this so-called geopolitical risk indicator, clearly you are seeing that these risks are growing by their number and hence it is also increasing. And as we have seen in this particular assessment of state of the economy, as the globally more than 100 countries are going to choose their leaders, choose their political representatives, it is also going to showcase the political direction of the political economy. Given this increasing geopolitical risks as part of measurement of these risks through this indicator is showing a worsening scenario. It is this which also explains why the global economic slowdown is being witnessed since 2022. Moreover, when you look at this so-called Dury World Container Index, this Dury Index in fact talks about what are those freight rates with respect to various containers which are carrying the merchandise towards most of the importing countries. And as you see that it has seen a rapid rise since this arrival of conflict, particularly in the Mediterranean region and also Black Sea region and also even the Red Sea region. Given this uncertainty, the freight rates has exorbitantly being raised and which is also causing a impact on the global economy adversely. Moving ahead, we also have this third aspect, that is consumer sentiment and financial conditions. If you look at this, particularly with respect to India, the consumer sentiment is becoming stronger and stronger over time. On the other hand, if you look at particularly of USA and UK, these are the economies where the consumer sentiment is particularly volatile. It is appear to be stronger at some point of time, it is becoming volatile on the other point of time. It is this situation which is causing uncertainty in the global economy. On the other hand, with respect to financial conditions, it was showing a particular kind of slowdown earlier, and then as you see that as the interest rates were kept unchanged at these levels of 6.5%, you see that the financial condition is also improving in economy. And you observe that this is also same or true in China, this is also better even in the euro area, but by and large USA and UK are witnessing a kind of slowdown. Moving ahead, the other high frequency indicator that we are going to look at is this global PMI. As you see that with respect to manufacturing, as it is going above this level or mark of 50, which is a positive indicator, globally this is showing an improvement, and largely we have to keep in mind that India is leading this particular scenario. Moreover, with respect to services, again the trend is positive, and the composite index, which includes both manufacturing services, is also positive. Moving ahead, with respect to the inflationary scenario, with respect to commodities and particularly of food prices, the Bloomberg Commodity Index has shown an trend of easing, whereby the pressure upon the expenditures that the consumers have to incur has eased clearly. And this is also visible with respect to the Brent to crude, even though we know that it may show a kind of volatility, but by and large it is also stable. However, with respect to food prices, as you see here, the volatility continues, and particularly in India, these food prices are showing a higher trend. But if you look at the global scenario, most of the food articles are seeing their price levels are getting eased. Moreover, this gold as a scenario, as you see that their price levels are increasing over time, this particularly indicates the fact that the consumer sentiment over the pricing levels across the globe seemingly is becoming negative over a long period of time. It is this which is pushing people to invest more in gold as a choice of ensuring themselves from the price pressures. It is 5 of these particular aspects which have been considered, which have been debated in what is called as RBI's review meeting that was held. And it is these 5 which also showcase India with a stronger base stronger macroeconomic stability and hence moving further strongly in this so-called global uncertain economic setting. Moving to the next article, we will look into the details of this new resolution that has been adopted by United Nations General Assembly. This article is important from GS paper 1 mains point of view, where this communalism, regionalism and secularism can be the topics under which this can be asked, particularly from the perspective of religious tolerance across the world and this UN resolution particularly against Islamophobia. Moving ahead, look at this previous year question. Consider the following statements. 21st February is declared to be the International Mother Language Day by UNICEF. Second statement, the demand that Bangla has to be one of the national languages was raised in the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. Which of the above statements are correct? Asked in 2021, clearly we know that this topic is also in tune with your preliminary examination requirements. There was a proposal from Pakistan for what is called as International Day to Combat Islamophobia, where at UN. We know that this was actually objected particularly by India, because when you say that there is Islamophobia, you are forgetting the fact that you are leaving out all the other religions. However, this resolution was passed and there was also a massive budgetary allocation which was prompted for a special envoy to combat Islamophobia. It is this context which has brought this into lot of debate. We know that UN's focus on Islamophobia as it is there, it is neglecting what is called as religiophobia, which includes maybe all the other religions. This is there across the world right from the Second World War times. We know in this modern period this has occurred. Second, UN is also failing to maintain religious neutrality when it says that there is only Islamophobia. Third, we know that already UN has what is called as International Day of Tolerance observed on November 16th. That means this appears to be a duplication of the same day. Fourth, there are many contemporary examples of religiophobia. For example, against non-Abrahamic religions, there is this particular approach. Hence, it needs a more inclusive approach rather than this exclusive approach. These are some of the critics that we have experienced. What are those various examples of religious phobia against non-Abrahamic religions? Take for example, this particular nation called Pakistan. Even though it is talking about what is called as Islamophobia, we know that there were instances of religious persecution of many minorities, including Hindus and Sikhs. Second, we know that constitutionally they have declared Ahmadiyas as non-Muslims. Third, Baha'i community, for example, who has their origin from Iran, they have faced persecution both in Pakistan and Iran. Fourth, we know that there was these instances of destruction of Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan, which is also of violation of what is called as religious tolerance that has to be observed. And you have many such instances of this so-called Sikh pilgrims being massacred, so-called Gurudwaras being destroyed, and also there were many attacks on other centers or structures of religion. All these point out to that examples of religiophobia. What must be the alternative? India, along with few other African nations, have proposed broadening this particular resolution such that it includes discrimination against all religions, number one. Number two, Belgium, for example, has also proposed what is called as condemning religious discrimination, condemning any kind of religious hostility, condemning any kind of religious violence, particularly including those who are Muslims, and expressed their concern about attacks on these so-called religious sites and hence even the religious intolerance and religious stereotyping. All these alternatives must be incorporated to make this more inclusive in its approach and structure. Hence, conclusively, we must make sure that the debate around the so-called Islamophobia must give way to what is called as religiophobia, focusing upon religious tolerance, non-discrimination and freedom of expression as fundamental underlying principles. Second, it is essential to address if this Islamophobia has to be addressed, but by broadening the perspective to encompass all other forms of religiophobia, we may address this situation in toto and hence make a inclusive and tolerant global society possible. Moving to the next article, we shall look into this article titled India Now Eyes Africa for Critical Minerals. As you clearly know that the world is moving towards clean energy technologies. Clean energy has become the paramount requirement for the entire world in order to address the climate change as a scenario. Along with that, if you lag behind, you are also lagging behind in terms of these technologies, and hence these critical minerals are of paramount importance in order to move towards this much required situation. This article is important from GS paper 3 economic development mobilization of resources point of view. This article is also important from the geography point of view, where you can also look at the distribution of these critical minerals over the world. Look at this previous year question again asked in 2020. Consider the following minerals: bentonite, chromite, kyanite, sillimanite. As you see in India, which of the above is officially designated as major minerals? Clearly, whenever such minerals are being seen in the newspapers, they are fundamentally important for your preliminary examination. What is the context? As we have clearly seen, Mines Secretary or Ministry of Mines has said that the African countries are being seen as the sources of these so-called critical minerals. Which are they? Zambia, Namibia, Congo, Ghana and Mozambique. All these 5 African nations are being now negotiated with by India. Second, what are these critical minerals and why are we looking for it? Clearly, we know that they are essential mineral resources which are vital for economic growth, national security and technological advancement. All these three knitted together in one single requirement. Third, this significance lies in the potential vulnerability of their supply chains due to limited availability, price instability and geographic concentration. I repeat, these three fundamental aspects have to be clearly remembered. They are available but in very limited quantities. Second, as they are very limited quantity, their price is very much unstable. And third, their distribution is also very much concentrated in terms of countries. Moving ahead, the Indian critical minerals identification process has 5 fundamental objectives. The first objective is it must support economic growth through the competitiveness and also consequently it must create jobs. Second, it must drive R&D and further exploration in terms of industry and technology. Third, it must enhance global security and partnership with allies, as we have clearly seen that they are also important in fundamentally making sure that your national security and international security is taken care of. Fourth, there is also raw material security for state of the art defense requirements. Moreover, you also have promoting climate action and environmental protection, which is the fifth and final objective that we have. Given these objectives, what are the efforts by Indian government in order to boost its critical minerals sector? First thing, it has released a list of critical minerals which are 30 in number. We can also see some of those minerals which are important. For example, nickel, for example, silicon, for example, strontium. All these are part of this list of critical minerals. Third, we know that government has allowed the mining of 3 critical minerals which are lithium, niobium and the so-called REEs. Moreover, you have to know that in order to attract bidders, the government also specified certain royalty rates for these critical minerals which are matching with the global benchmarks in order to make sure that we are even open for this foreign direct investment. Moving ahead, we have also said that this increased exploration work has been done by the Geological Survey of India. For example, we clearly know that in Kashmir, some of the lithium blocks have been found and they have been auctioned again by the government. Second, the report of this Committee on Critical Minerals has been submitted to the government and it has identified certain critical minerals and it has recommended a center of excellence for critical minerals in India. Third, we also know that this partnership referred to as the Mineral Security Partnership has been considered by India and we are part of this particular partnership. We know that it is a US led partnership having 14 countries which aims to catalyze both public investment and private investment in the so-called critical mineral supply chains globally. Our step now looking at Africa is clearly in tune with this partnership. What are those three major producing countries with regard to the some of the critical minerals? You look at the rare earths, you clearly see that USA, Russia and Australia are the major producers here, out of which Russia is the top. Second, with respect to graphite, again you see that Russia is the major producer. Third, with respect to lithium, which is required to make sure that you are also moving towards the next phase of industrial revolution, it is produced much by the Australia and followed by Chile. Then cobalt, again you see that Chile is the major producer and Australia and Indonesia are limited producers in this. Followed by nickel and copper, in which again Indonesia is the major producer and for copper, as you clearly see, Australia is the major producer. Now, if you look at this particular data, there is a possible question with respect to critical minerals because for a number of times this has appeared in the newspapers. They might tell you that Russia is the largest producer of graphite and they might also give you that Russia is the largest producer of cobalt. But if you look at these two statements as part of this data, first statement is right and the second statement is incorrect. It is for this you should know and have all this data in your hand with respect to these very important critical minerals that we have identified. Moving ahead, there is a level of global distribution, particularly with respect to lithium, copper and nickel, about which our search is very strong. As you see in this, the lithium is distributed in these regions of South America, where we have already seen that with respect to lithium, Chile is one of the largest producers. And here also you would see that in Australia, clearly it is demarcated. So, this geographic distribution is also important for your examination. And as you see this and as you mark some of the notes from here and from 2022 to 2030, the production levels is going to increase given the fact that demand for these critical minerals is also exorbitantly high. Having completed the discussion over the articles, we shall now move to the practice questions. Take this first prelims practice question. Consider the following statements. The first statement, the Mineral Security Partnership is a US-led collaboration of 14 countries that aims to catalyze public and private investment in critical mineral supply chains globally, which is a right statement. Second, India is not a part of the Mineral Security Partnership, which is a wrong statement and hence answer has to be A in this. Moving to the second question, the Indian critical minerals identification process tries to address 5 core objectives. Which of the following are the objectives? Supporting economic growth, competitiveness and job creation, driving research, innovation and exploration, enhancing global security partnership with allies, raw material security for state-of-the-art defense, and then promoting climate action and environmental protection. All of these are there and hence all of the above has to be the answer, that is D. Moving to the third question, consider the following statements. March 15 is declared as International Day of Tolerance by United Nations, which is a false statement, we know this. As a result of efforts made by Pakistan, November 16 is declared as International Day to Combat Islamophobia, which is also a false statement and hence answer has to be neither 1 nor 2 because he is asking you to identify the correct statements. Moving to the fourth question, consider the following statements. In this, we are going to have the assertion and reasoning. Assertion. The basic structure of the constitution acts as a limitation upon the constitutional power of parliament under article 368 of the constitution, which is the right statement. Reasoning is parliament is empowered to amend any part of the constitution, including the power of scrapping the constitution itself, which is a false statement because they can't amend anything that is part of basic structure of the constitution. So here the answer has to be A is correct, R is incorrect. Moving to the fifth question. Consider the following statements. First one, for last 5 years, the high frequency indicator of PMI for manufacturing and services has shown growth, which is not a correct statement because during the pandemic it was not showing this. Second statement, the Dury index gives details about the world container freight rates, which is the correct statement, and hence as this question is asking you to identify the statements which are correct, answer has to be 2 only, that is B. We shall now do one mains practice question. Analyze how strategic support of US for Palestine and Ukraine is shaping global geopolitics and discuss the potential repercussions of these changes on international relations and security alliances. You can write the introduction where you can outline the significance of the support of the US in these international geopolitics, and you can also write about how the shift in US policy towards Palestine and Ukraine has created a kind of impact on global geopolitics. In the body, you can write about specifically as this impact on the Palestine situation, where US support for Israel and its implications for Israel-Palestine conflict, as it was earlier the case, was being replaced with how US support towards aid towards Palestine is changing the scenario. And here, as this stance is changing, the potential revitalization of peace negotiations in place of escalating tensions is what must occur. Moving ahead, its impact on Ukraine can also be understood, where this US military and humanitarian aid has played a huge strategic role in this particular aspect of countering the Russian aggression. First one. Second one, it can also have that the NATO's eastern flank security and European defense mechanisms may also be in jeopardy. If you look at the scenario of global repercussions because of this shift in the policy of the US, you would see that particularly it will have its impact on US alliances in Europe and also over this transatlantic partnership that it has nestled. On the other hand, it will have its impact even on the Indo-Pacific region, where this requirement of maintenance of balance of power amidst rising challenge of China will be in some kind of threat. Moving ahead, its credibility and reliability as a global ally, global partner will also be under challenge because this shift in policy stance of USA is going to throw up challenges for all the other allies. In conclusion, you can say that this significant realignment will play a role in international politics amidst this unilateral stance that it used to take. It has to give way for this multilateral stance. And on the other hand, the other global actors must also have their adaptive strategies towards these global politics, given the change in the role of either USA or other such powerful economies and nations. Moving ahead, you also can conclude by saying the importance of or writing the importance of the global proactive diplomacy and the importance of multilateral engagement in addressing the global challenges. That's all, my friends. We have concluded today's DNA analysis. If you like this video, please do like, share and comment on the video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel Narayana IAS, the one-stop destination for all of your UPSC Civil Service examination requirements. Thank you one and all.